In the spring of 1453, the final defenses of Constantinople collapsed under sustained Ottoman assault, marking not only the end of the Byzantine Empire, but also the abrupt transformation of the lives of thousands within the city's walls. Among the affected population were noble women whose status, while once affording privilege and security within Byzantine society, offered little protection amid the legal and military realities that followed the city's capture. Historical records indicate that the fall of Constantinople triggered a complex process shaped by Islamic legal frameworks, military customs, political calculation, and long-standing practices concerning captives in late medieval warfare. Contemporary accounts describe the immediate aftermath as chaotic, but structured by established norms of conquest. Ottoman military practice permitted the distribution of movable wealth and captives as part of the soldier's reward following a successful siege, particularly when a city resisted rather than surrendered. Chroniclers from both Byzantine and Ottoman perspectives noted that inhabitants were subject to enslavement, ransom, or forced relocation depending on their perceived value, connections, and the intervention of authorities. For noble women, these outcomes varied significantly, shaped by age, family status, perceived political usefulness, and the interest of Ottoman officials. Surviving documents suggest that noble women were rarely treated as a homogeneous group. Some were captured during the sack and entered the general system of enslavement, while others were separated early due to their aristocratic lineage. The Ottoman administration possessed a long-established interest in incorporating elite captives into imperial structures when advantageous. This was not purely an act of benevolence, but a calculated mechanism of statecraft. The presence of Byzantine noblewomen within the Ottoman court or elite households could serve diplomatic, symbolic, and administrative purposes, particularly in consolidating legitimacy over newly conquered Christian populations. Chroniclers noted that Mem too demonstrated an awareness of the political symbolism surrounding elite Byzantine families. Certain high-ranking women, especially those connected to prominent aristocratic lineages, were removed from general distribution and placed under imperial protection. Historical records indicate that this intervention reflected the Sultan's broader strategy of presenting himself not merely as a conqueror, but as the successor to imperial authority within the city. By preserving or repurposing elements of the Byzantine elite, the Ottoman state aimed to stabilize governance and reduce the likelihood of continued resistance among the remaining Christian population. Legal codes of the period reveal that enslaved women could occupy a range of positions within Ottoman society, from domestic servitude to integration into elite households. Noble origin did not prevent enslavement, yet it often altered the trajectory of captivity. Contemporary accounts describe instances in which aristocratic women were purchased or claimed by high-ranking officials who valued their education, linguistic ability, and familiarity with courtly etiquette. Such qualities were considered assets within elite households where administrative competence and cultural adaptability were important. Surviving Byzantine testimonies suggest that the psychological impact of captivity among noble women was profound, though descriptions remain restrained and filtered through religious and cultural interpretation. Chroniclers frequently emphasize themes of displacement, loss of familial networks, and the erosion of status. However, these accounts also indicate that adaptation was a recurring reality. Some women negotiated positions of relative stability within their new environments, particularly when conversion, marriage, or patronage provided pathways to security. This process, while shaped by coercive circumstances, reflected the pragmatic survival strategies common in late medieval captivity. Ottoman archival material suggests that a number of noble women entered the imperial palace system, though precise identification remains difficult due to naming conventions and conversion practices. The palace functioned not only as a center of governance, but also as a structured institution where enslaved women could receive education, training, and potential advancement. Historical records indicate that women of non-Muslim aristocratic background were sometimes valued for their familiarity with diplomatic cultures beyond the empire, making them useful intermediaries or companions within elite networks. Contemporary accounts also describe the role of ransom as a significant mechanism affecting the fate of captured noblewomen. Families with surviving resources, particularly those connected to Italian trading communities or Orthodox ecclesiastical networks, occasionally secured the release of female relatives through negotiation. Surviving documents suggest that Genoese and Venetian intermediaries played a role in facilitating these arrangements, reflecting the commercial and diplomatic entanglements that persisted despite the city's fall. However, the success of ransom efforts depended heavily on wealth, timing, and the survival of male relatives capable of organizing negotiations. Chroniclers noted that marriage constituted another pathway through which noblewomen's circumstances were reshaped. In some cases, Ottoman officials or converts of Byzantine origin married aristocratic captives, creating unions that blurred the boundaries between conquest and assimilation. Legal frameworks permitted such marriages following conversion, and surviving records indicate that these arrangements could provide women with a degree of social protection, albeit within a transformed cultural and religious context. These marriages also served broader political functions by linking local Christian elites with emerging Ottoman administrative structures. Historical records indicate that forced relocation formed a parallel aspect of post-conquest policy. Mem II initiated population transfer programs intended to repopulate and economically revive Constantinople. Noblewomen, along with other inhabitants, could be relocated within the empire, sometimes separated from their original communities. Surviving documents suggest that these transfers disrupted traditional aristocratic networks, while simultaneously creating new forms of dependency on Ottoman authority. The redistribution of populations was both an economic strategy and a mechanism of control, reducing the concentration of potentially resistant groups. Contemporary ecclesiastical sources reveal that religious identity remained a central concern in the narratives surrounding captured noblewomen. Chroniclers within Orthodox communities emphasized the preservation of faith under captivity, framing endurance as a form of spiritual resistance. However, Ottoman administrative sources rarely framed the situation in theological terms, instead reflecting bureaucratic categorization based on legal status, household affiliation, and economic value. This divergence highlights the differing lenses through which the same experiences were recorded and interpreted. Surviving correspondence suggests that some noblewomen maintained indirect influence even after displacement. Through connections with clergy, surviving relatives, or members of the diaspora, certain individuals participated in the preservation of family memory, property claims, and cultural traditions. While their political authority diminished, their role in transmitting identity across generations remained significant. Historical records indicate that such continuity contributed to the resilience of Byzantine cultural elements within Ottoman society, particularly among Orthodox communities in the Balkans and Anatolia. Chroniclers noted that the experiences of noblewomen must also be understood within the broader context of gendered captivity across medieval warfare. The fall of Constantinople did not represent an isolated departure from prevailing norms, but rather an event shaped by long-standing practices across both Christian and Islamic polities. Noble status offered advantages in negotiation and potential integration, but did not eliminate vulnerability. The intersection of warfare, enslavement, and aristocratic identity created outcomes that were neither uniformly tragic nor easily categorized as survival through privilege. Historical records indicate that the memory of these women's experiences persisted within both Byzantine refugee communities and later historical writing. Accounts preserved in monasteries, family genealogies, and diplomatic correspondence reveal an enduring effort to document the fate of elite captives. These narratives often balanced mourning with pragmatic acknowledgement of adaptation, reflecting the complex realities faced by women whose lives were reshaped by imperial transition rather than concluded by it. Surviving Ottoman sources, while less focused on individual biographies, indirectly confirm the integration of former Byzantine elites into imperial structures through references to households, property transfers, and administrative appointments involving converted families. The relative silence regarding personal narratives underscores the bureaucratic nature of the Ottoman record-keeping system, which prioritized legal and fiscal categorization over individual storytelling. The aftermath of the conquest therefore produced a spectrum of outcomes shaped by negotiation, coercion, and institutional absorption. Noblewomen captured after the fall of Constantinople experienced a profound reconfiguration of identity, status, and autonomy. Yet historical evidence suggests that their lives did not disappear into uniform obscurity. Instead, their trajectories reflected the adaptive capacity of individuals navigating the intersection of conquest and governance, where personal survival became intertwined with the political transformation of an imperial capital whose fall reshaped the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries to come. The The transformation of noblewomen's lives after the fall of Constantinople continued to unfold long after the initial violence of conquest subsided. Historical records indicate that once the immediate distribution of captives concluded, Ottoman administrative priorities shifted toward stabilization, taxation, and urban reconstruction. Within this evolving framework, the presence of aristocratic Byzantine women acquired new significance, not solely as captives, but as individuals embedded within networks that could influence the empire's relationship with its newly incorporated Christian subjects. Surviving documents suggest that Mem-Too's broader urban policy played a decisive role in shaping the conditions under which many noblewomen lived. The deliberate repopulation of Constantinople involved the relocation of diverse communities from across the empire, including Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Contemporary accounts describe how aristocratic Byzantine households, though diminished, were sometimes preserved in modified form to assist in maintaining administrative continuity and social stability. Noblewomen who remained within the city often found themselves negotiating a delicate balance between adaptation and the preservation of inherited identity. Chroniclers noted that property and dowry arrangements became a central concern for displaced aristocratic women. Legal codes of the period reveal that confiscation and redistribution of property were standard features of conquest. Yet surviving petitions indicate attempts by former Byzantine elites to reclaim portions of their assets. Noblewomen occasionally participated in these negotiations, particularly when widowed or separated from male relatives. Ottoman judicial structures, including local courts, permitted non-Muslim subjects to present claims, though outcomes varied widely depending on political circumstances, patronage, and the strategic value of the petitioners. Contemporary ecclesiastical sources describe the church as a crucial intermediary in supporting noblewomen navigating post-conquest realities. The re-establishment of the Orthodox Patriarchate under Ottoman authority provided a limited institutional framework through which community disputes, marriage arrangements, and charitable assistance could be addressed. Surviving correspondence suggests that monasteries and convents functioned as refuges for certain aristocratic women, especially those who sought to avoid integration into Ottoman households or remarriage. These religious spaces offered a measure of protection, though they operated under the constraints of Ottoman oversight and taxation. Historical records indicate that the Ottoman court continued to selectively incorporate individuals of Byzantine noble background, including women whose familial connections carried diplomatic or symbolic importance. Conversion to Islam, while not universally imposed, could significantly alter an individual's trajectory. Chroniclers noted that some noblewomen entered elite Ottoman households following conversion, where their education and familiarity with Byzantine ceremonial culture could be leveraged within courtly life. Such integration was often accompanied by changes in name and identity, complicating later historical efforts to trace individual biographies. Surviving Ottoman administrative material suggests that women integrated into elite households were subject to structured hierarchies rather than arbitrary treatment. The organization of domestic spaces within the imperial palace and high-ranking residences reflected carefully regulated systems governing education, discipline, and advancement. Noble origin did not automatically guarantee elevated status, yet it could influence placement and opportunities for mobility within these environments. Contemporary accounts emphasize that literacy, linguistic skill, and knowledge of court etiquette remained valuable assets capable of reshaping an individual's position over time. Chroniclers also observed the emergence of intermediary figures among the captured aristocracy, including women who acted as cultural and linguistic bridges between Orthodox communities and Ottoman authorities. Surviving documents suggest that such roles were often informal yet significant, particularly in matters involving negotiation of taxation, marriage permissions, and property disputes. Noblewomen familiar with both Byzantine traditions and Ottoman administrative expectations could contribute to the mediation of tensions within newly integrated urban and provincial communities. The experience of exile formed another recurring theme in the fate of captured noblewomen. Historical records indicate that many Byzantine aristocratic families relocated to territories beyond Ottoman control, including Italian city-states and other parts of Europe. However, not all women possessed the resources or opportunity to leave. Contemporary accounts describe how those who remained within the empire often maintained correspondence with diaspora relatives, contributing to the preservation of genealogical memory and property claims abroad. This trans-regional communication underscores the persistence of aristocratic identity despite geographic fragmentation. Surviving narratives from refugee communities reveal a mixture of mourning and pragmatic adaptation in the recollection of women who remained under Ottoman rule. Chroniclers frequently emphasized the loss of imperial status, while simultaneously acknowledging that survival required engagement with new political realities. Noblewomen who adapted through marriage, patronage, or economic participation were sometimes portrayed ambivalently, reflecting tensions within diaspora communities regarding identity, loyalty, and the boundaries of accommodation. Legal codes of the period reveal that marriage practices after the conquest reflected both continuity and transformation. Noblewomen within Orthodox communities often married members of emerging local elites, including individuals who had secured positions within Ottoman administration while retaining Christian identity. These unions contributed to the gradual reshaping of provincial aristocracies, blending Byzantine lineage with new structures of authority. Contemporary accounts suggest that such marriages could provide stability and preserve elements of social prestige, though within a fundamentally altered political landscape. Chroniclers noted that the economic activities of noblewomen also adapted to changing conditions. While aristocratic women in Byzantium traditionally relied on landholdings and dowries, post-conquest realities sometimes necessitated direct involvement in household management, artisanal production, or patronage of religious institutions. Surviving documents indicate that widowed noblewomen, in particular, exercised agency in managing reduced estates, negotiating taxation, and supporting dependents. These activities, though less visible in official records, contributed to the endurance of aristocratic households under Ottoman governance. The question of education remained significant in shaping long-term outcomes. Historical records suggest that noblewomen who entered Ottoman elite environments often received training that extended beyond domestic roles, including instruction in languages, literature, and courtly arts. While the purpose of such education was embedded within the hierarchical structure of elite households, it also facilitated the preservation and transmission of Byzantine cultural elements. Chroniclers occasionally reference the presence of Greek-speaking women within Ottoman court circles, indicating the persistence of cultural exchange even within contexts defined by conquest. Surviving ecclesiastical accounts further describe the role of noblewomen in sustaining religious patronage. Donations to monasteries, commissioning of icons, and support for charitable institutions remained important expressions of identity and community responsibility. These activities were not merely devotional, but also functioned as mechanisms for maintaining social memory and reinforcing networks among Orthodox populations. Historical records indicate that such patronage contributed to the resilience of religious institutions that operated as centers of education, cultural preservation, and communal cohesion. Contemporary Ottoman sources, though less focused on individual narratives, indirectly reflect the integration of Byzantine aristocratic women through references to household structures, inheritance disputes, and conversion records. The bureaucratic character of these documents emphasizes legal status and fiscal obligations rather than personal experience, yet they provide evidence of the varied roles women occupied within imperial society. This administrative perspective underscores the Ottoman state's pragmatic approach, prioritizing stability and revenue while accommodating diverse populations. Chroniclers also highlighted the generational dimension of adaptation. The daughters of captured noblewomen often experienced identities distinct from those of their mothers, shaped by upbringing within Ottoman-controlled environments. Surviving documents suggest that some families gradually assimilated into the empire's social fabric, while others maintained strong ties to Orthodox tradition and memory of Byzantine heritage. This generational divergence reflects the broader transformation of the Eastern Mediterranean following the city's fall, where continuity and change coexisted within familial and communal structures. Historical records indicate that the perception of noblewomen's experiences evolved over time within historical writing itself. Early Byzantine refugee narratives emphasized suffering and loss, while later sources adopted a more nuanced perspective acknowledging the complexity of survival under Ottoman rule. Chroniclers increasingly recognize that the lives of these women cannot be reduced solely to captivity, but must be understood as part of a longer process of negotiation, adaptation, and cultural persistence. The fate of noblewomen captured after the fall of Constantinople, therefore, cannot be confined to a single narrative of decline or assimilation. Surviving evidence suggests a spectrum of lived realities shaped by legal frameworks, household structures, religious institutions, and individual strategies of survival. Within these constraints, noblewomen contributed to the transmission of memory, the reshaping of elite networks, and the quiet continuity of cultural traditions that endured beyond the collapse of the empire that had once defined their world. Over the decades following the conquest, the experiences of noblewomen captured in 1453 became increasingly embedded within the evolving social fabric of the Ottoman capital and its provinces. Historical records indicate that as the immediate memory of the siege receded, the administrative priorities of the empire shifted toward consolidation, taxation, and the gradual normalization of governance over a religiously and culturally diverse population. Within this environment, the trajectories of former Byzantine aristocratic women reflected broader processes of imperial accommodation, where identity, legal status, and personal survival were continuously renegotiated. Surviving documents suggest that the restructuring of Constantinople into an Ottoman imperial center created both constraints and opportunities for women of noble background. The city's reconstruction involved the redistribution of neighborhoods, the restoration of commercial activity, and the establishment of new administrative districts. Noblewomen who remained in the capital often lived within orthodox communal frameworks supervised by the patriarchate, which functioned as an intermediary between Christian populations and Ottoman authorities. Contemporary accounts describe how this arrangement allowed for limited communal autonomy, enabling the preservation of marriage customs, inheritance practices, and charitable networks that had long defined aristocratic identity. Chroniclers noted that over time, distinctions between pre-conquest aristocracy and emerging Ottoman-era elites became less rigid. Legal codes of the period reveal that wealth, patronage, and proximity to administrative authority increasingly shaped social standing, sometimes more decisively than inherited Byzantine titles. Noblewomen who successfully adapted to these changing conditions could maintain influence through family alliances, economic management, and religious patronage. Surviving petitions demonstrate that women occasionally appeared as property holders, litigants, or guardians of family interests, indicating a degree of participation in the legal and economic life of their communities. The role of memory remained central in shaping how these women understood their circumstances. Contemporary ecclesiastical writings frequently framed the fall of Constantinople as a collective trauma, with noblewomen occupying a symbolic position within narratives of loss and endurance. Monastic chronicles describe the preservation of family histories, relics, and devotional objects associated with aristocratic lineages. These practices were not solely expressions of nostalgia, but also mechanisms for sustaining identity across generations raised within an altered political order. Historical records indicate that some noblewomen maintained connections with broader Orthodox networks extending beyond the Ottoman Empire. Correspondence preserved in Italian and Balkan archives suggests ongoing communication between women in Ottoman territories and relatives or patrons in diaspora communities. These exchanges often involved requests for financial assistance, mediation in legal disputes, or support for ecclesiastical institutions. The persistence of such communication highlights the transregional dimension of aristocratic identity, which continued to operate despite the geopolitical rupture of 1453. Chroniclers also emphasized the gradual transformation of captivity into settled life. While initial experiences were marked by displacement and uncertainty, many noblewomen spent the majority of their lives within stable household structures after the conquest. Surviving documents suggest that widows and unmarried women frequently relied on kinship networks within Orthodox neighborhoods, where communal solidarity provided material and emotional support. In some cases, former aristocratic households evolved into modest yet respected family units whose prestige derived more from historical memory than from economic power. Ottoman administrative material reveals that conversion and intermarriage contributed to the emergence of hybrid identities among the descendants of captured noblewomen. Legal records occasionally reference individuals with Byzantine lineage who occupied roles within the Ottoman military, bureaucracy, or commercial sectors following conversion. For women, such processes were often less visible in official documentation, yet contemporary accounts indicate that familial integration across religious and cultural boundaries was not uncommon. These developments complicate later attempts to categorize the experiences of noblewomen solely within narratives of cultural separation. The educational environment within Orthodox communities played a significant role in preserving elements of Byzantine intellectual tradition. Historical records indicate that noblewomen participated in the patronage of schools, manuscript copying, and religious instruction, particularly within monastic settings. Such activities contributed to the survival of liturgical practices, literary texts, and artistic traditions that might otherwise have been lost amid political transformation. Chroniclers occasionally attributed the continuity of certain devotional and cultural practices to the efforts of aristocratic women who maintained networks of patronage despite diminished resources. Surviving Ottoman sources indirectly reflect the economic agency exercised by some noblewomen through references to charitable endowments, property management, and inheritance arrangements. While Islamic legal institutions governed the broader framework of property relations, non-Muslim communities retained internal mechanisms for regulating family assets. Contemporary accounts describe widowed noblewomen negotiating dowries, supporting dependent relatives, and contributing to communal welfare. These responsibilities, though often conducted within private or ecclesiastical spheres, represented a continuation of aristocratic expectations regarding stewardship and social obligation. Chroniclers noted that the generational passage of time reshaped how the fall of Constantinople was remembered within families descended from captured women. Oral traditions preserved stories of displacement and adaptation, yet these narratives gradually merged with experiences shaped by Ottoman urban life.